Hello and welcome to Debate Clash. In this video, we're going to be going over the January 2017 public forum debate topic, which is resolved. In order to better respond to international conflicts, the United States should significantly increase its military spending. Now keep in mind that in this video, this is going to be part one, where we're going to go over the affirmative arguments, and then we're going to do a whole separate video, which is part two, and that's going to be the negative arguments. We'll provide a link in the description and also at the end of the video.
Awesome. So our three main sections we're going to be going over today are military, non-military, and as usual, we're going to be having a workaround section where we discuss some things that may come up during the round.
Now, before we jump right into the topic, we also wanted to thank everyone. We hit the 1,000 subscriber mark, which is absolutely fantastic, and we just keep going up. So if you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button. It would really help us and make us feel just warm in the heart. In addition, we're also going to be including our notes from this point going forward that you can access by going to debateclash.com, and we will also provide a link to those notes in the description below.
Yep, so on to our first section here, we're going to be going over military points first. So on the first point, the bigger the United States military is, the less chance of escalation there is going to be. So basically what this point is saying is if our military is bigger, other countries are going to be less likely to want to get involved in a conflict with us. Along those same lines, also, if we are already in a conflict with another nation, if we have a larger military, we're better able to quickly de-escalate the situation into a non-violent scenario.
Absolutely. And going forward, too, there's also this concept, if you haven't already looked into it or don't know what it is, it's called hegemony, or hedge for short, H-E-G-E. Go ahead and look that up. It's going to be coming up a lot, this topic. And what it is it's a combination between hard power and soft power, i.e. military power and the ability to have allies and get along with other nations. So right now, the United States is essentially the global hegemon. They have the most power in the entire world, and they can go into conflicts, resolve them, and they put their hands into too many different conflicts. But the idea behind this is that if we increase the military budget, we maintain our spot as the global hegemon. If we don't increase our military budget, then we're going to get left in the dust. Other nations that might be more corrupt or have different stances on democracy and human rights, they might become the global hegemon, which could lead to a variety of issues. Some other impacts that you can derive from this as well is once the United States isn't that global hegemon anymore, there might be power struggles or power wars that could arise, costing tons of money and a lot of lives. So if you have policy debaters on your team, go talk to them. They've debated hedge a lot. Grab their back files or visit the Open Evidence Project or Free Evidence Project, which you can find just by Googling those.
Yep, so on to our next point. Instead of being like a concrete point here, we just wanted to say that if you're running any military points in your case, make sure to bring up examples where a larger military would have been more beneficial. So, for example, in the, let's say in like the Middle East, so in Afghanistan or Iraq, if we had had a larger military, would we have been able to finish those conflicts faster? Would we have been able to save more lives? Bring up examples where you can show that having a larger military would have been a better situation than what we did.
Absolutely, and make sure you give quantifiable impacts for that too. So like Michael mentioned, maybe if we would have had a bigger military, we could have solved the Syria conflict a lot quicker. That would have saved X amount of money, X amount of lives, and everything would have been great. Those specific impacts are what really convinces the judge. Now moving on to the next point as well, one thing that you can argue is that a larger military allows us so that we're not spreading ourselves too thin. The United States does have a knack for getting involved in a lot of international conflicts, especially when human rights abuses are at play. And so if we have a larger military, that means that we aren't having little bits of military in every conflict. They're not being resolved. They just escalate. So you just say that a larger military allows us not to be spread too thin and actually resolve the conflicts that we're involved in.
Exactly. Along these same lines, one way we maintain relationships with our allies is helping them to defend their interests and their countries. So if we're spread too thin, we're not able to effectively help our allies in these situations. So having a larger military would allow us to maintain these relationships that we already have with our allies and help to protect them.
So you can say that hard power leads to an increased amount of soft power.
Exactly.
Right. So let's go into our next category, the second one, which is the non-militaristic impacts.
So on to our first point under this category, we need to have more military to help better defend our economic interests. So the perfect example for this is when we went in for Desert Storm. The whole reason for this operation was to defend the supply of oil in the Middle East. Something that if we lost would have huge economic impacts to our country. And so we went in a military operation to defend this. If we don't have a large enough military, these operations are not going to be able to happen, and we're going to lose economic interest that we may have in whatever part of the world.
Absolutely, and you can expand those economic impacts. Once again, we can't bash into your head so many times, just keep expanding on impacts. And with this, another argument that you can make is that a increased amount of military spending boosts the economy in general, i.e. if the United States is going to buy a lot more arms, or is going to invest in cybersecurity, or whatever it may be, there's going to be an increased amount of jobs that are created, there's going to be more money fluctuating throughout the economy, which will certainly help us.
Exactly. So another point here is that more military spending gives the perception of the United States being stronger. So the famous quote, "Talk softly, carry a big stick." We don't necessarily have to use the big stick, right? We can just having a military gives the perception that we want in order for other countries to say, okay, I don't really want to mess with them. They're just gonna kind of annihilate me. And so having the big stick, so to say, protects us because it de-escalates conflicts before the conflict even arises. And so make sure to mention the impacts for this: decrease war, save lives, just like the regular decrease war impacts, I guess you could say.
Yeah, we're the big kid on the playground. We can just look at the kids that are fighting and they'll just break up because they're scared of us. Now, for the next point too, this is actually expounding off of what Michael previously said, which is that we can actually use our money not necessarily as boots on the ground or as an increased amount of AK-47s or tanks. We can use our increased amount of military spending to invest in cybersecurity programs defensively so that people can't attack us. We could use them offensively for cybersecurity, so that when a conflict arises, instead of having military forces go in and resolve that, we could just launch an EMP, shut down all their computers, decrease the amount of intel and information they have, and solve the conflict that way. So don't allow the negative to force you into, you are saying boots on the ground, you are saying tanks. We could use this to get intelligence and to attack in a cyber way.
Exactly. So our last section here, workarounds. So the first point under here is I wanted to go over the definition of significant. So in the resolution it states the United States should significantly increase its military spending. So what does significant really mean? Well, if you look around for some definitions, you'll, for example, I found Merriam-Webster, the definition of significant means having meaning or having or likely to influence or affect. So it doesn't necessarily, don't let the negative trap you in this box where they say the affirmative must increase the military budget by X amount. They have to increase it by 20%. No, don't let them do that. If the increase that you specify in an example is significant, if it has an impact, then it is significant. So again, just don't let them trap you in a box saying you have to increase it by $1 trillion or whatever amount.
Exactly. And speaking of burdens on the affirmative, one thing that you can do is you can force the burden onto the negative. And the way that you do this is the resolution says, in order to better respond to international conflicts, right? The goal is to better respond to international conflicts by increasing the military budget. Meaning that the negative has to show that we can better respond to international conflicts with less military. So it's a pretty easy thing that I would keep saying, especially if you have a lay judge, which is, look, the goal is to better respond to international conflicts, get them resolved faster, more efficiently, and the negative thinks that we can do that with less military. What a joke.
Yeah. So now I wanted to go over one more definition, and that's for conflict, because again, the resolution states in order to better resolve international conflicts, what is a conflict? So the negative may argue that a conflict is, just an argument, a disagreement. It's not necessarily physical, but that's not what the definition states. So if you look at some definitions, you will find that a conflict can be an argument, a disagreement, but it also can be, and it's equally likely, I found just as many definitions for a physical confrontation and just an argumentative confrontation. It can be war, battle. In fact, those are two of the main definitions I found under conflict. So just, again, don't let the negative trap you in a box. You have just as much freedom as they do on the definition of this word.
Absolutely. And another way that we thought of in order to force the burden onto the negative again and make it even harder for them, so this could be run as an observation, which is the negative has to advocate a permanent budget. It has to be static. It has to be the same. So even if we go into conflict, even if we start another war, even if World War III sparks up, the negative says, don't increase military spending to respond to this conflict. So that is something that is also huge that you can express to the judge, which is, hey, a war starts up, and we think that we need an increased amount of military spending proactively, which is right now, or reactively. But the negative says none at all.
Exactly. So just one last thing we wanted to talk about here. This resolution, at first glance, it's really negative-sided, at least to us it was. After we really spent some time thinking and discussing this topic, we realized that the phrasing of the resolution is very favoritive to the affirmative. Because of the resolution, it is what Nico was saying, that the negative is advocating never increasing military spending for any conflict. And it's kind of ridiculous once you think about it, the advantage that gives to the affirmative. So just make sure you really understand what the resolution is saying and how the phrasing changes the meaning.
Absolutely. And thanks again for watching our video. If you need more research tools, we mentioned this in our last month's video, which is that we created the Debate Clash research engine, which only searches top news sites, top magazines, governmental and educational websites. You can find that at debateclash.com/debateclashresearchengine.html. We'll also put a link just right here. You can go ahead and click on that. So it's a really cool tool. And go ahead and watch part 2 of the video that addresses the negative side of this topic.